we start, Anshu ma'am, I think we should start in 1 minute's time. Exactly. Thank you, Pankaj. So please start, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
A very good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the 13th E-Dialogue International on Promoting Conflict Competence to Gandhian Approach of Communication. It is a great privilege to partner with Gandhi Smriti Darshan Samiti, Ministry of Culture, Government of India for this prestigious event, and we are honored to have a distinguished panel of speakers from all around the globe. We have Dr. Simon Howden, we have Professor Drissia CHOUIT, we have our friend Elizabeth from Japan, and we will soon be joined by Fatima Nadri from Hyderabad. So we welcome you all to this e-dialogue on a very, very important topic. And before I start, without much ado, I would request Professor Vedabhyas to give details about the poster competition also we had along with this. And we got entries from all around the country. I would request our technical help to please share the posters and announce the winners. Pankaj, could you please share the posters, shortlisted posters?
अच्छा सिलेबस भेजा हुआ है मैंने
I would request all the participants to mute themselves. So these are the posters that we got as part of the individual poster competition. Please give a big hand of applause for all these participants. And now I'm going to announce the name of the winners. First prize goes to Sonali Keshri from IMS Noida. This is the poster that has got the first prize. The second prize goes to Pehel Gupta from JIMS. She is a student of Bachelor's in Journalism and Mass Communication. Thank you, Pankaj. And the third prize goes to Tanishka Srivastav from Rajkumar Academy, Lucknow. Moving further, I would now request Honorable our Director General from Gandhi Smriti Darshan Samiti, Dr. Dipankar Shrigyan, to give the inaugural address. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Well, ma'am, before our director gives the welcome address, may I kindly, today is actually the death anniversary of Frontier Gandhi, Abdul Ghaffar Khan, and he was one of the most important person on nonviolence and one of the ardent followers of Mahatma Gandhi. In fact, he was strongly inspired by Gandhiji's strategy of nonviolence, and he was popularly known, and he amassed the world's first non-violent army in this region. He persuaded almost 1 lakh of his countrymen to lay down guns and vow to fight non-violently against the British regime. In fact, after almost 80 long years, the Pashtun leaders struggled incessantly for the rights of his people without ever raising arms. So today is his death anniversary, and one of his very powerful quote, which actually is something very important to find out, is that in today's world is traveling in some strange direction. You see that the world is going towards destruction and violence, and the speciality of violence is to create hatred amongst people and to create fear. I am a firm believer in non-violence, and I say that no peace or tranquility will descend upon the people of the world until non-violence is practiced. Because non-violence is love and it stirs courage in people. Thank you very much. In fact, now I request our director, Mr. Dipankar Shuigyan, to give the welcome address. And while he's giving the welcome address, may I request Gulshan, what we do is generally when we have these programs, we offline mode, we, as I mentioned during our test run yesterday, we give the hand woman clock, which is one of the most important symbols of Mahatma Gandhi, through charkha, and a charkha to all the honorable distinguished speakers. But in this online mode, as it is not possible, we are giving a small token of appreciation through a talking book, Mahatma Gandhi's own written book, Gandhi's constructive work, to all our distinguished speakers, Mr. Dr. Simon Howden, Professor Drissia CHOUIT from Morocco, Fatima Hidari from Afghanistan, and Elizabeth Catherine Gamara from Japan, and also Dr. Angshu Arora, who is and Dr. Gauri Chakravarti, who are representing the Amiti School of Communication. So this is the book, and as I say, this has already reached your respective email addresses. Thank you, Gulshan, for this. And now I request our director to kindly give the welcome address.
A very warm good afternoon to all of you. It's my privilege on behalf of Gandhi Smriti and Darshan Samiti to welcome Dr. Simon Howden, Ms. Drissia, Ms. Elizabeth, Ms. Fatima, Ms. Ansu Arora, and Oriji. What a coincidence today that we are having at one hand the death anniversary of Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who is known for his conflict competence, and at the other hand, we are organizing this webinar. In today's world, conflict happens to be the most embedded part of our life. They were started conflicting with each other. Even the nations are conflicting. The person to person are conflicting. And sometimes we call it the conflict as an argument between ignited minds. But most of the time, we find that the conflicts leads to some ugly incidents. We must be aware that the conflicts are good till it is healthy. But the moment it crosses its boundary or its demarcation of healthy conflict, it immediately turns into some sort of violence. And our expression always goes through our mode of communication. Either it is verbal or non-verbal. When we talk about verbal, we can easily identify what is wrong. But in the non-verbal communication, the body languages are the subject of experts to be identified, which is offensive and which is non-offensive. We have a galaxy of experts today with us. And I am sure that all these 5 or 6 experts with us will be touching all those points which are the core to conflict. And they will also discuss the modes, how we can develop our competence to manage conflict. To me, the Gandhian method is the best method to resolve it, because it is totally non-violent and totally committed to peace. Any other method is just to satisfy one or satisfy. And sometimes we try to satisfy the conflict, but again it erupts. But in the Gandhian method, it is always a win-win situation for all the conflicting partners. I must thank Anshu Arora ji for organizing this program for all our participants. I don't know how she has selected this crucial subject of the time today, when we are in the zone of conflict everywhere. But at the same time, I'm sure that she must have some feeling during her professional work that this is the most striking requirement of the time. I invite all the participants in this webinar to kindly feel free to interact with our experts and try to solve all the confusions which are arising in their ignited mind about this subject, and try to follow what the experts advise you on the subject. Thank you. Thanks a lot, all the organizers and all the experts. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, as we have our 4 distinguished experts for this panel, before that, I would like to share something which we call as the Gandhian model of communication before we go to our distinguished speakers for the day. We are, once again, we are really honored to have all of you with us, Dr. Simon Howden, who is an internationally known mediator, Professor Drissia CHOUIT, who is a professor of linguistics, and she is involved with the GAPMIL, the Global Alliance on Media and Information Literacy, and is part of our whole initiatives on media and information literacy of the UNESCO. We have with us Elizabeth Catherine Gamara, who is a TEDx speaker. She is into peace and conflict studies and also with the Academic Council of the United Nations system. And Fatima Hidari, she's the youngest member of the distinguished speakers. She's from Herat province of Afghanistan. And in fact, as we are talking just now, my colleague is talking to her over the voice call, trying to see how she can be connected and what is the way in which she can speak. So while we once again thank all of you on behalf of Gandhi, Smriti and the Amiti School of Communication that you have joined, let me quickly share with you those 7-8 important flag-offs on what constitutes the Gandhian model of communication. Is my PowerPoint visible?
No, sir, no.
No? Now?
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Well, quickly, because without wasting much time for our honor, we are all eagerly looking forward to our listening to our distinguished speakers. Let me quickly run through this whole slide of few slides there. Let me start with this beautiful quote when we are talking of nonviolent communication of Mahatma Gandhi. Let us be clear regarding the language we use and the thoughts we nurture. For what is language but the expression of thought? Let your thought be accurate and truthful, and you will hasten the advent of Swaraj, even if the world is against you. So, the first and important critical point of the Gandhian model of nonviolent communication, it entails non-violence in all aspects, verbal, non-verbal, thoughts, and how the mind and the heart and body remain disciplined at every stage. If you see his ideas, the way and his non-violent action, if we analyze, this actually gets reflected in that. The second most important element of Gandhian model of nonviolent communication is the importance of nonviolent persuasion as an attribute of nonviolent communication process. Persuasion. Now, when we are into the whole realm of mediation, we are in the whole realm of negotiation, of resolving, managing conflicts, nonviolent persuasion, when people are in difference of opinion with us and there are two conflicting parties. This is a very, very important element, non-violent persuasion. If you see the life and the action and the message of Mahatma Gandhi, we will find that the essence, his idea of essence of non-verbal symbolism, like fasting, like the use of the charkha, and these all aims at encouraging self-introspection, self-discipline, struggle for justice, and emotionally connect with the people, even the adversaries. One of the most important aspects of the Gandhian model of communication is that it encompasses the principles of human interconnectedness and underlines the importance of the cosmocentric approach to human nature. You see, at a time when we are in the realm of this pandemic, the essence of human interconnectedness is most important, more than ever before. If you see the Human Development Report 2020, it also talks on that, which flags off the red flags, some of the critical element that is there concerning the planet, the planetary pressures and the issues of climate change, and how the essence of Anthropocene actually contributes to the whole issue of there. So in that context, human interconnectedness, that is the intrinsic balance between the human nature and all other living beings, needs to be respected, needs to be looked at. His strategy involved in reaching the hearts of the masses through constructive work for social and economic emancipation. You see, his idea, his strategy of reaching out to people was how he could initiate constructive work for social and economic emancipation. That was his important model of communication. He communicated with the people and got them into doing constructive work. He motivated them to do constructive work. That is an extremely important element of his form of communication. You see, the five basic pillars of nonviolence: respect, understanding, acceptance, appreciation, and compassion. These are the foundational architecture of nonviolent communication ecosystem. You see, respect, unless and until we promote respect in the society, there will always be differences and conflicts. So respect leads to greater understanding leads to greater acceptance, and greater acceptance leads to greater appreciation. And Also, extremely important is compassion, the spirit of compassion that needs to be nurtured by every individual in the society so that we can have a holistic, non-violent communication ecosystem. So the Gandhian model entails the evolution of an individual to a higher plane of values and ethics and respect for human dignity. That is something very, very important. The enhancement of personhood and humanhood, we can say, is an important aspect of Gandhi. And for Gandhi, the means and the ends were extremely important and they were actually in sync with each other. Unless and until our means were ethical, our end result could not have been mattered much. So the means and ends are extremely important, and he actually related it to the seed and the tree, as both of them being equally important in every aspect. The model underlines the importance of being morally disciplined, strictly adhering to the principles of ahimsa and truth, meticulous planning, creative and innovative, open and flexible. Here, as I continue, finish these slides of mine, focusing on the Gandhian model of communication, let me share with you Gandhi, Smriti, and Darshan Samiti is running for the last more than a year almost. Free online course on nonviolent communication, which now has a traction not just within India but globally. We have had workshops on nonviolent communication with different universities across the world and also within India. And the course on nonviolent communication, we are looking at from the angle of the Gandhian model. And this is a definition of nonviolent communication as given by a very senior Gandhian, Mr. Natpat Thakker, and I share with you. He says, to me, nonviolent communication literacy would mean how our communication efforts should be nonviolent. How our ability and capacity to communicate not only with ourselves but with our family and society be non-violent in all aspects and overall how the entire process of communication, whether between individuals, groups, communities and the world at large, should be non-violent in nature. Mr. Natpat Thakker further says this would entail deep understanding of the art and science of nonviolence and its centrality in all our daily actions. It is not just verbal and non-verbal communication. The non-violent communication literacy would also include whether our thoughts and ideas are non-violent or not. This would also mean how we can rid of our preconceived notions of individuals or groups with whom we want to communicate and stop evaluating them to suit our own. So this was my small little slides related to the Gandhian model and what exactly is nonviolent communication. So now we now all eagerly look forward to listen to our esteemed panelists. So over to Dr. Anshu Arora.
I would now warmly welcome Professor Simon Howden, who has a multidisciplinary, diverse background and entails an enriched mediation journey and expertise. He is a certified behavioral analyst, personal coach, a master practitioner in NLP, and he has extensive work in the field of restorative justice, mediation, and body language. Over to Professor Simon Howden.
Thank you very much. Well, it's been a journey listening to the introductions here. And firstly, I'd like to say thank you for the gift. That was very nice. I'm very impressed with all the artists that I saw there. And I've been very fortunate over 30 years. I've been able to travel the world and listening to Dibanka there, that I agree with him that now's the time for everybody to come together and communicate peacefully. And I think you'll find that everybody in every country want to do that. It's just that people are misunderstood or there's miscommunication. So what I'll do is I'm just going to put up on the screen, excuse me while I do this. Is that on the screen now?
Yes, 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 please.
So I've taken the liberty, and please excuse me if I don't get it 100% right, but I've tried to take a correlation with mediation and with Gandhi and his communication. So we can see the correlation between mediation and mediation itself, and with what Gandhi wanted to portray. So sorry, you see this? I'm having trouble trying to get to the next slide. Okay. Gandhi, in my readings, had a three-pronged approach. He had interpersonal approach, symbolic dimensions of actions, and a media dimension. I'm not going to talk about the mediation dimension, but I am going to come back to the interpersonal and symbolic dimensions of actions. Philosophical context, and interactions and emotions. If we looked at the interpersonal approach, it's about sending and receiving a message between parties. When mediating, we have to really carefully listen with empathy. I think a lot of the time, as mediators, and must I say, we're all mediators all of the time. We mediate with our children, we mediate with our partners, we mediate with our wives, we mediate with our parents. So even if you're not a specific mediator, you're mediating in your general life. You're mediating with the people you work with. And we're mediating with the community. And one thing we do, in what I've seen over many cultures over the world, we don't always listen properly. We're too concerned about what's coming out of our mouth and what we're trying to get across, instead of allowing a space and listen with empathy. We've got to touch the heart, and that's something that is really important. You won't know how the other person feels until you walk in their sandals. We have a saying in Australia, they're moccasins, and I think that's from America. But what we mean by that is you've got to put yourself in their shoes. You've got to feel what they feel. You've got to understand what they're going through. And until you understand that, you can't listen with empathy. So how can you help them mediate or solve complex issues if you don't know how they feel? So it's really important to walk in their sandals and understand how they feel. I think it's important to be inquisitive and ask questions. A lot of the time we want to tell people, we want to tell them, we want to solve problems. We don't ask enough questions and listen. So be inquisitive. Always want to learn. Mediation is not about process. And I don't know whether you've ever heard this rule, 80-20 rule. 80-20 rule is in a lot of things that happen through life. But 20% of mediation is about process. 80% is about communication. But as mediators, I think we find that we get at that round the wrong way, and we say 80% is process and 20% is about communication and understanding. You've got to be a great conversationalist. And you're just listening, you're just asking or hearing me say, you've got to be a good listener. Well, a good listener is being a good conversationalist. You ask questions and listen. Listen to what the other party's trying to say, or listen to what both parties are trying to say. Be still and quiet. What I've found over 30 years of working with people is the uncomfortable silence is the second question. You actually don't have to say anything. Just like that, it was silence and everybody started to think what was happening. Had my microphone been turned off? Had my speaker not working? What was happening? The uncomfortable silence, the silence where you don't speak, is where a lot of things can start to materialize. Silence promotes thought. And it's really important to the people that you're working with that you get them thinking and lifting them outside of their situation and participate in the conversation that you have. So your role is a facilitator. You're not solving the issue, you're getting them to talk together. Symbolic dimensions of actions. The question of creating symbols. And when I thought about this and I read about this method or methodology, it's not so much about creating symbols in mediation. It's looking for what people can't see. To look for the non-verbal cues, especially in this digital world through COVID and how we've all of a sudden all become part of video conferencing. It's really important when you're talking face-to-face with someone, you unconsciously see the non-verbal cues. But it's really important that when you're speaking through technology, that you look harder or ask more questions because you don't see those non-verbal cues. And non-verbal cues, it's been estimated that are about 80% of our communication. So they're a crucial part of how we communicate. It's also important to learn observable behavior. Understand, is the person introverted? They might be extroverted. Do they like doing tasks and thinking? Or are they more about feelings and relations? It's important to ask questions and understand where they're coming from, because then you can help, you can mirror those people, you can help and you can interact with them so you build a rapport with them. Understanding observable behavior fast tracks rapport. And that's the key to being able to interact with people well. They've got to feel comfortable with you. And the only way they'll feel comfortable with you if you are open and allow yourself to be open with them. A rapport builds a harmonious relationship between people. It assists in building a strong bond between the parties and the mediator. Look for the non-verbal cues. A flushed face. What does a flushed face mean? It could be embarrassed. It could be someone not knowing. They could be just hot. All of those things are telling you something that sometimes someone doesn't speak outside or doesn't speak verbally to you. Their eyes might look away. They might avert your gaze. Is it a cultural process? Do they not feel comfortable? Is there a power imbalance? The eyes are the windows to the soul, and looking at the eyes can tell you a lot about what's happening with the people that you're communicating with. Are their arms and legs crossed? Unconsciously, if we cross our legs or cross our arms, people do say that it's just comfortable. But a lot of the time when you're in conflict, arms crossed or legs crossed mean that they're not open to receiving anything. So if their arms are crossed, give them something in their hand. It automatically opens up their hand, and unconsciously they start to feel more open and being open to accepting what you're talking about. Are they in the moment? Philosophical context. And hopefully I get this word right. Gandhi adopted the principle of satyagraha. And you might be very aware of this, the ideal of nonviolent resistance. I believe in mediation. This translates to the mediator's ability to assist a party by using empathy to move beyond the party's frustrations and or biases around a topic where they believe they are right and are having trouble seeing the other party's point of view. When we believe as people that we've been faulted or we're wronged or someone's not listening to us, we have a tendency to double down and not be open, and we want someone, we want compensation. So it's really important to be able to open up someone and to ask them questions and ask them to see past their frustrations and biases. Why do you feel like that? Or what do you think the other person thinks? Interactions and emotions. This is the theory of communication and emotional intelligence. Gandhi was very strong about this. All behavior constitutes a message and thus impossible not to communicate. So just in being and having a behavior, you're communicating. Whether you're not verbally communicating, you're communicating non-verbally or unconsciously. And depending on how the other person is on the other end of that communication, they might see that as good communication, they might see that as bad communication. So it's very important to be aware of how you are acting. Any behavior depends on the modalities, that is the way in which something happens or is experienced, of a group, which is the product of culture, rules and markers, and individuals being caught up in a process of interaction and co-construction of meaning. The ability to perceive emotions, access and generate emotions to assist thought, to understand emotions and emotional knowledge, and to reflect, regulate emotions so that to promote emotional and intelligent and intellectual growth. That's emotional intelligence. It's really important to learn or to study what makes people emotional. Why do I get emotional? Maybe think inside yourself. What made me angry the other day? What made me happy? Because if you can understand that within yourself, you can help other people discover that in themselves. So it's always important to self-evaluate. Self-knowledge is essential. Daily self-reflection with a mentor. Every single day that I mediate, I spend 20 to 30 minutes doing self-reflection. And people would say, why do you do that, Simon? You've spent 30 years on that. Because every single day I'm learning something new about myself, something that I didn't know. And with the world of complex that we live in, we have a tendency to, even if we're as neutral as can be, our biases get in road with our decisions or how we communicate. The more you self-reflect, the better you are aware of your emotions, your external emotions. It's important to promote conflict confidence, and that's what this talk is about. Put your parties at ease. The first thing you do is make sure they are feeling comfortable. Do they want to be there? Provide a safe place. Are they feeling comfortable? Is someone listening that they don't want to hear the conversation? Space is safe for a conversation so they can feel open about talking to you. It's about confidentiality. Make sure everything that you're told you never share with anybody else. Keep them on track. They'll have a tendency to go back to the self-interest, to things that they feel that they need to be rewarded or they need to be solved. Ask open questions. Something like, why does that matter to you? How is that so? Tell me about the first time that happened. What did you do? It is not a mediator's responsibility to get an agreement. I'm going to say that again. This is so important. If you don't grasp anything that what I've sent except for this will help you in life. It is not a mediator's responsibility to get an agreement. It is mediator's responsibility to facilitate and provide space for the parties to have a conversation. A mediator is successful if both parties have mutually respectable conversation. It's our job. When I enter into mediations, and I've done mediations with countries, I've done mediations with family law, I've done mediations with Indigenous people, I never think that I'm going to come out with an agreement with the parties. I always think that I am going to create a space that those two parties or those three parties or how many parties there are have a conversation. And it's up to them to work out a solution. My role is to use my tools to help them to get there. Lastly, it is okay for parties to show emotion. I think a lot of times I get questions, oh, but what if they get angry? What if they, that's fine. Allow people to have their conversation. I mean, you can keep it in control. They've got to be respectful. You know, they can't go off on a tangent, and they've got to be respectful to everybody at the table. But they're allowed to have emotions. That's part, crying, fear, laughter. Allow them to share their emotions. I want to thank you for allowing me to speak, and if there's enough time, I open the floor for anybody that might have some questions.
You can write the questions in the chat window. Thank you, Simon, for gracing our occasion. And I personally have an interest in emotional intelligence. And like everything starts in the mind. Is it really, I would want to ask you that, is it really, you know, these days there are change in the thinking patterns that, you know, if people show their emotions, they are strong people rather than, you know, they are not weak if they're showing their emotions in public. So could you just
sorry,
give a thought on that?
Yes. I agree that a lot of people feel embarrassed because they think that people showing emotions are weak. But I think that it's important that I think that males cry as important as, you know, women laughing. You know what I mean? It's like it's part of the emotion, and it's a spectrum. So there's a whole line of different emotions, and we should be able to feel those emotions, and we should be able to respectfully, I'll say respectfully, share those emotions. I mean, there's a time and place to do that. So I think the problem, and I can only talk about Western society, is that they inhibit their emotions too much, which create too much internal conflict. It doesn't allow a conversation about how someone feels. They hold it in, and they don't allow that emotion out and be able to have a conversation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much. Also, it reminds me of a statement which says that you cannot not communicate. So even if a person is silent at any point of time, he is communicating a lot through his body language, through his gestures.
Yes, very true. And they're probably communicating more than if they're verbally communicating, you know. So I think it's important. Some people sit there and they don't say anything. And then what you're doing, if you allow people to sit there, if you sit there in silence, you're allowing the other person to make up their own mind what's going in your head. So you're giving them the power and they're making decisions without hearing from you. So why would you do that? Wouldn't it be more important to share your stories, share your thoughts, so then you can have a conversation with the other party? And I think that's a very insightful comment. A lot of people think being quiet is a good thing. It's certainly not.
Yeah. Can we have one or two other questions from the participants?
No, I think we can ask questions possibly later and go on to the next speaker so that people think, because Simon has given us a lot of interesting thoughts to be revisiting and self-reflecting. So possibly we should ask him some more questions in the chat box while we go to the next honorable speaker.
Yeah, thank you, Simon, for your insightful lecture. And then I'm moving on to the next speaker. I'm delighted to introduce our next speaker, Professor Drissia CHOUIT. She is a professor of linguistics and media studies in Moulay Ismail University of Meknes, Morocco. She has been a former consultant to UNESCO, and she is member of the editorial board of IGBST. She is associated with UNESCO Media Literacy Development University Network and Intercultural Dialogue. I welcome you, Professor Drissia.
Thank you, Dr. Aurora. Good morning, everybody in Morocco. Good afternoon in India. Maybe good evening in other parts of the world. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Vidabis Kondu and Dr. Anshu Arora for inviting me to take part in this international e-dialogue on promoting through Gandhian approach of communication. I will address the power of language in building peace or igniting conflicts. The aim of my speech today is to highlight the importance of language and communication in every aspect of our daily lives, and to show that success we achieve in building relations and positive attitudes and environments is greatly dependent on the way we use language and the way we communicate. In fact, we are all born with the ability to speak and communicate. Language is acquired in the first early of childhood, and it is acquired within a particular social and cultural context, inducive of linguistic competence and communicative competence. But the whole process takes place in an unconscious way, and this is why it is taken for granted by the majority of people. Today, in connection with e-dialogue on how to promote conflict avoidance and conflict resolution using communication for peace, I want to bring to the consciousness this unconscious knowledge about language and communication in order to show the centrality of language and communication in building peace or instigating conflicts. As Mahatma Gandhi eloquently stated it, words have both the power to destroy and heal. When words are both true and kind, they can change our world. This will be divided in three parts. I will first deal with self-awareness, then communication awareness, then language awareness. Self-awareness. Easily notice that in endeavors to solve word problems relating to thorny issues like racism, armed and non-armed conflicts, extremism in views, attitudes, and actions, the focus is always on the other. understanding the other, understanding the culture of the other, understanding the beliefs of the other, which are great goals that I do commend and I recommend that they be strengthened to become a way of being and a way of behaving, always in harmony with the other. But today, I want you all to reflect with me at the personal level of each one of us. Do we know who we are? Do we know how we think? Do we know what makes us happy or what frightens us? Do we know why we have such fears and joys? When we are so happy or so angry, can we control our emotions and empathize with others and listen carefully to their views and perspectives, which might be quite different or totally opposite to ours? When we are under the impact of strong emotions, can we still think in a rational, logical, and harmonious way to analyze and evaluate particular situations and particular discourses before taking a decision? If we have such self-awareness, such self-control, and such self-management, we have potential to contribute substantially to peace building and construction of positive environment wherever we are. If not, we have to take time to reflect on ourselves and to understand ourselves. Because if we do not understand ourselves, we cannot understand the other. If we are not self-confident, we cannot trust the other. If we do not have self-esteem and self-love, we cannot esteem and love the other. If we have a flawed way of thinking, we will always evaluate the acts of the other in a flawed way. And if we cannot control our emotions and have a positive attitude, we will always be in conflict with the other. No one of these skills and competencies is innate. All have to be learned and practiced regularly till they become an integral part of us. It is never late to do it. The role of education is primordial in this regard, including lifelong education. This self-awareness in the communication process. This leads us to the second point, communication awareness. Communication awareness refers to understanding the nature of communication. That is how people communicate. Understanding the communication process helps us to understand ourselves both as individuals and as social beings. A key defining element of communication is that communication is systemic in the sense that there is intersection between two basic systems that operate in any communication act: the internal system and the external system that constitutes the overall communication system. The internal system refers to the characteristics of the individual, and the external system refers to elements that exist in the environment outside the individual. This shows that personal elements like personality traits, frame of reference, attitudes, perceptions, affiliations, ideologies, etc., are always present in any negotiation and in any collaborative work. because these are the elements that each individual brings with him or her to the debate or negotiation. Therefore, this should be taken seriously into consideration if we want to build constructive and collaborative environments for debate and negotiation. Other determining elements in the definition of communication is that when we communicate, we do not share only information and viewpoints, but also attitudes and feelings. And we want, in a way or another, to influence the other, at least by convincing them, and at most by making them change their attitudes and behaviors. The ability to deconstruct the message and reconstruct the meaning is one of the fundamental linguistic skills. This leads us to the third part of this presentation, which is language awareness. Language awareness refers to understanding how language works, how language is encoded and decoded both at the discursive level and at the level of encoding social relationships, power, or solidarity relations. It is also about the weight of words that we use in our everyday life, or words to which we are exposed in various communication contexts. Words that can lead to positive change or conflicts and tensions. Here are some examples of efforts to reduce gendered or pejorative language. First, the use of chair or chairperson instead of chairman. Second, the use of visually impaired instead of blind. Third, the use of people with special needs or people differently abled instead of handicapped. Fourth, the use of African American vernacular English instead of Black English. And fifth, the use of co-cultures instead of sub-cultures. It is also important to keep in mind that the way we name people and events impacts on our perception and the way we think about them. The worst of all is the polarization of people by being either good or bad, or those who are created to rule and those who are created to be ruled. Examples in this regard are well known to everyone, therefore there is no need to mention them here. We should also keep in mind that different wordings of the same thing lead to different meanings and interpretations and convey different underlying attitudes and beliefs. No two words have exactly the same meaning. There are either nuances of meaning or substantial differences in meaning to take into consideration when we use different labelings to refer to some events and to some people. See, for example, what happened at the US Capitol on 6 January 2021. For the history of the United States, the word terrorism was used not to pinpoint others, but to refer to groups of Native Americans. Republican Representative Nancy Mace from South Carolina used the label domestic terrorism. Melina Abdullah, a Black Lives Matter organizer and Pan-African Studies professor at California State University, Los Angeles, gets more specific, calling the group white supremacist terrorists. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi used three labels: rioters, insurrectionists, and terrorists. In CBC News 60 Minutes on January 18, 2020, one of the experts invited by Bill Whitaker said that may have been the most predictable terrorist incident in modern American history. While other news outlets labeled them as pro-Trump mob or Trumpists, the New York Times, in an article titled "Decoding the Far-Right Symbols at the Capitol Riots," stated there were militia flags, banners of extremist groups, as well as absurd images of dinosaurs and comic books that belied the violence that was to unfold. In Fox 4, we read, in Chansley's case, prosecutors said the charges involve active participation in an insurrection attempting to violently overthrow the United States government. Giving an exact name to what happened in the US Capitol seems to be difficult. Hence, the different labelings which lend themselves to different meanings and different interpretations, because riot is not insurrection, and insurrection is not terrorism. And it is not always the case that an act of terrorism is described to be the most predictable terrorist incidents. Moving in the scale from riot to terrorism, transiting via insurrection gives different levels in the tenacity of the violent acts committed, but all of these labelings have in common the strong condemnation of what happened. Besides, calling them pro-Trump mob makes explicit the link between those involved in the violent acts and President Trump, and referring to them as Trumpists stresses more this link. This shows how different words and different labels referring to the same event may lead to different interpretations and impact how we perceive events and how we make sense of the word. This also shows the importance of linguistic and communication literacy in our daily lives, because it simply makes our lives better at the personal, relational, and professional levels. In conclusion, I would like to celebrate the key component in Gandhi's philosophy, which love is the deeply rooted. Love is the essence of life and the foundation of humanity. Love makes us humans deep in our inner selves. If you have the capacity to love and spend love around you, you will be in peace with yourself. If you are in peace with yourself, you will certainly be in peace with the others, and you will contribute positively to the well-being of humanity. Let us all search for that human fiber with which we are all created and give it a central position in our lives for a better future for us and for future generations. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Drissia. I would like to thank you for your insightful session, and especially when you're talking about love and the feeling of, unity. We all are, connected to one universe, and this is a really good effort to bring people together from around the globe. And we would want that you have, continued guidance, and you guide our students to do research projects on linguistics and media literacy, and we would want your support in carrying out those research projects. Thank you, Drissia, Professor Drissia once again. And moving on, we are having Fatima Hedri, who is the youngest member of our panel. She is part of Herat Children's Peace Builders Network. And as you all know, Herat province of Afghanistan is recently facing a lot of conflict, and she is doing great work in the area of bringing together youth and especially girls to work in the area of peace and non-violence communication. So I welcome Fatima Hedri from Herat, Afghanistan.
Well, actually, since as I mentioned right at the beginning that Fatima is not able to get through with her internet connectivity, what she has done is she has shared with me her PowerPoint and also a audio clip of her talk, so which my colleague Mr. Gulshan Gupta is going to play out. So let us listen. Gulshan, please go ahead. Gulshan, can you hear me? Please start. Just one second, just one second. We are just trying. भेज दिया मैंने. May I ask the participants if the audio thing is coming? Dr. Anshu, please.
The audio of the PPT is not running well.
It is not
Hello,
coming.
I hope you are okay, healthy, wealthy,
Yeah.
and safe. This is
No, it is.
Fatima from Afghanistan, a group member of Herat Children Peace Builders. So sorry for the problem of internet connection. Actually, it's a great honor for me to be in such a conference on the title of Promoting Competence through Gandhian Approach of Communication. Hello everyone, I hope you are okay, healthy, and safe. This is me, Fatima from Afghanistan. You guys, honorable, wonderful, and respected speakers, each one Simon, Drissia, Elizabeth, Ansho, Dipankar, and respected Sir Mr. Kondo. Actually, I was supposed to talk with you via the WebEx, but unfortunately, I don't know what is the problem here. It is.
Pankaj?
Yes, sir.
Today I want to just talk about two titles. The first one is conflict issue in Afghanistan, and the second one, Gandhi's insights and thinking as the solution for this conflicts. Starting here in Afghanistan, conflict is a big obstacle again.
Vedaji and Pankaj, just look at the PPT.
वो उसका फातिमा पीपीटी तो मैंने किया था, दोनों किया था.
Yeah, please look at the issue.
Yes, yes. Pankaj. Hello, Pankaj. Hello. Hello.
Sir, yes, sir.
Yeah, her voice was coming very clearly, but all of a sudden it is not coming now.
Wait, sir.
It is still very, very unclear.
Here in Afghanistan, conflict is a big obstacle against peace. If I just define what is conflict from my point of view, conflict is actually a problem, a serious disagreement, a fight, a violent communication, a battle, an argument, or even it can be a bad war. For me, it is like this, according to the situation of Afghanistan. You know, here we have different tribes. There are living different groups. Each one of them, although we have many improvement in the case of communication, but it is still there are groups that just like to bring conflicts or create conflicts. So that is why I just today decided to mention some Gandhi's insights and theories as a solution for this kind of conflict, for just making the world a better place. In Afghanistan, there are different kinds of conflicts, but I like to point out three kinds of conflict. Conflict with the self. Actually, I view conflict with the self as conflict with our own selves. For example, I, as a resident in Afghanistan, I have problem with my own self. I have arguments with my own self. I do not respect myself. I hate myself. I do not love myself. This is a kind of conflict inside me. That is why that doesn't let me live my life happily. So it's a big problem here. Maybe you have just an evidence that the people of Afghanistan are known as the saddest people in the world. That is because of the conflict that they have with themselves. The next one is conflict with others. Conflict with others, this is the most kind of or types of conflict in Afghanistan, unfortunately. As I told you before, there are different groups, different tribes that they are fighting against each other. They are just making conflicts against each other. The reason, just I will clarify the reason when I'm just explaining the Gandhi's theories. For example, my own family is the best example of this kind of conflict. Originally, I'm from Kor province, but right now I'm a resident of Hera city. When we were living in Kor province, my father and my uncle, they just fought together and they had a violent communication against each other. That was why my father was forced to just be a migrant of Hera city. Or you see many groups that are known as terrorists, like Daesh, like Talibs. They are just killing our people innocently. Actually, this is a kind of conflict for me, a kind of conflict that is changed to war. The next one is conflict with the nature. You know, nature is our property, nature is our wealth, nature is our home. But unfortunately, there are many people that don't consider it and behave really badly against that. The great example is just throwing the trash on the nature, killing the wild animals. These are the great example of conflicts in the nature. If I come to the results of conflicts, unfortunately, the result of conflict is heated argument, physical abuses, loss of peace and harmony. You know, we in Afghanistan, we are in a process by the name of peace process, but still we are not succeeding into that process. Still there are conflicts going on. There are many people in Afghanistan who are worried about these issues and they don't know what to do, to run away from Afghanistan, to kill themselves, or just to bring conflicts, unfortunately. So these are all the conflict issues in Afghanistan. Okay, as I told you, these are the conflicts that Gandhi's theories and insights really help to be solved. You know, Gandhi was a peace leader. He was the father of the nation. He has many wonderful and useful insights and theories. They're really nice and they're really just workable. Theory is the theory of nonviolent communication. For me, nonviolent communication is to just behave peacefully with all human beings, with all creatures of God, with, as Gandhi says, with human to human, human to all living beings, human to all creature and natures. What does nonviolent communication mean? Nonviolent communication, it means to have nonviolent speech and action. To never hate anyone, to never just curse anyone. The purpose of nonviolent communication is maintenance of a good relationship with all creatures, human beings, and all just people all around the world, not only people, as I told you, the nature, the animals. Openness, it means to accept others, to be friend with others, to just listen to them, to just speak to them, to just negotiate them, and to just be a counselor, a nice counselor for them. Or flexibility. Flexibility, it means to be able to bring changes. We are all human. We are nice gifts in the world. We can do everything we want and we can bring changes in any bad situations. We can also use the nonviolent communication theory, but we have to use that human to human, as Gandhi says, human to nature, human and all living beings, not only human. Gandhi also have many nice pillars for peace building and maintenance or maintaining a good relationship among all. The first one is respect. Respect everyone. Respect all those things who deserves respect. Understanding. Understanding of everyone. Poor, rich, wealthy, healthy, and sick. Acceptance. As I told you, one problem in Afghanistan is just racial problems. One tribe do not accept another. Acceptance is the best solution for that. If we accept each other, we can work together. Just Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the nation, just worked for unity, for peace, and appreciation. We have to appreciate and inspire those who just need appreciation, those who need to stand, those who deserves appreciation. Mahatma Gandhi he offered the world peace, love, and friendship. He just saw all the nature's beauty. He saw all the human beings, all the living beings' beauty. He heard the people's need, and he felt our feelings, our pains. He asked the people to work together for the unity and peace. He didn't ask just the Indians, he asked the world. He worked for the education, welfare, yes, and progress of peace, progress of children. As he says, or he has a nice quote, nonviolent communication or nonviolent is a weapon of the strong and a language of life. Yeah, truly that's like that. If we behave non-violently, if we just communicate non-violently, it is a nice weapon for all the human beings, for all the creatures to be together and stronger. Also, it is a language that we can speak, we can communicate with each other nicely. And let's do not forget that he predicted that from violent communication results into harm. He has another nice quote. He says, where there is a love, there is a life. It means the world should love each other. The people living in the world, the creators living in the world, love each other, love others, love the nature, love all living beings. As I told you before, relationships, as Gandhian's theory and pillars, relationships are based on 4 principles: respect, understanding, acceptance, and appreciation. He has another nice quote. The good man is the friend of all living beings. It means I, Fatima, living in Herat as a human, I should be friend with all creatures in the world, those who love to be loved, those who love loving, and those who love kindness, those who are deserved to be loved. He also says, you must be the change you wish to see in the world. Actually, I just interpret it like this. It is not important to change the world. It is important we ourselves be the change the world needs. If we be the change, if we be an agent of change, the world itself will be changed into a better place. So, as he says, if we want to reach a real peace, we must educate our children, or start educating our children. This is a nice quote. As he says, we shouldn't live in yesterday or tomorrow. We should live now and work for a peaceful situation. We should stand as he stood for truth, unity, idea of independence, and togetherness of the world. This was all I wanted to explain about Gandhi's theories and insights as a solution for Afghanistan. I'm sure if the people of Afghanistan and those who are living in Afghanistan consider these theories, insights, and quotes, they will live peacefully and have a peaceful life. So, thank you all for listening to me, and thank you, Mr. Kundu, for offering such a wonderful and amazing conference. I hope you just enjoyed my sayings and my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima. I'm really sorry for the issues, technical issues that went into the whole thing, but we must appreciate the fact there is someone who is sitting in a remote area of Herat province of Afghanistan, and she is trying to put together her views on how various theories, ideas of nonviolent communication could be brought in the context of the conflict there. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Anshu, for our final speaker of distinguished speaker of the day.
Thank you, Dr. Kundu. Next, we have our speaker, Elizabeth Catherine Gamara. She is a TEDx speaker, former Rotary Peace Fellow at International Christian University. She is concurrently a Japanese government-funded MEXT researcher at International Christian University, and she has been getting a lot of awards. The list is long, so I'll mention a few. TUMI USA National Award, the Martin Luther King Drum Major Award, Young Philanthropy Award, the Diversity and Equity Award, and a lot of other awards. So we are very, very delighted to honor and welcome Elizabeth Catherine. It's all yours, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here with all of you. I am very happy to be here. My mediation experience comes from working with indigenous communities back in the United States and with the Native American different tribes in the tribal court. So that's a bit of my context with mediation, but I also volunteer for Mediators Beyond Borders International, writing some articles, which is where I met wonderful Mr. Simon, who is a wonderful mentor and wonderful example. So today I will be sharing a little bit about the Gandhi philosophy in alignment with what I have been learning from top experts, mediators that I've been able to have some dialogue with. So I want to start off with saying that if you want to be a mediator, this is actually a very good time to start. As one of my mentors, a mediator in China, told me, that mediators normally have open minds, and their job is to open the minds of others, right? And the New York Convention on Arbitration, which is very different than our mediation, has gained international presence, and it's become a way to solve and mediate issues. But currently, the new Singapore Convention on Mediation, which is a new type of convention with different signatory countries, is developing, and it's being ratified in certain countries. So once the Singapore Convention, you might have already, but moves on, I think that will build a new international stage for mediators. So if you've thought of becoming a mediator, this is a good time to start. I think the Singapore Convention will bring about mediation at a much larger international stage. So the Gandhi approach to me is much of an attitude, you could say. So what I will do in my very brief talk is kind of mention 4 questions that I had in mind when I'm thinking about the Gandhian philosophy, the top expert mediators I've been able to get to meet, and kind of my experience, and go with these 4 questions and provide some ideas that you could consider as people that want to go into the field or already in the field. So when I was thinking about mediation, 5 questions came to mind. The very first one is, how do I approach mediation? Number 2 is, who can be a mediator? Number 3, how can I start getting experience in mediation? Number 4, what is the most important thing I should know about mediation? And number 5, what kind of mindset and mentality should I have? So I will go through the 5 questions really briefly, but with some insights of top experts in the field that have been able to shed some light into this and kind of align it with the Gandhi philosophy and attitude. So first of all, how do I approach mediation? That's one of the questions I asked one of my mentors, who is named Vic. He's from India, actually. He works in the UN mediation program, and he's also a personal coach. And he says to me, quote, coming in and pretending to know everything was going to get me in trouble. So I came in with a beginner's mind. And I made it clear that I needed to help from the participant to understand that what I would be most helpful. And he says, I decided to leave my mindset. He was educated in the US and grew up in the US for part of his life. So he said, I took out my Western mindset and asked people to bring their own ideas and notions to the table. So I think that's very powerful. Wherever we grow up in the world, if we take our mind off the way we've been trained and be open, I think that's important. And Gandhi said something very similar about the mind. He said, and I'm quoting, the mind may wander, but let not the senses wander with it. So it says, if the senses wander where the mind takes them, one is done for. So those with great awareness have the greatest nightmares. And I think it talks about awareness and the importance of the mind. So I thought that was very powerful. Number 2, who can be a mediator? Who can really be a good mediator? And one of my mediator mentors, who currently is mediating in Paris, a company that specifically focuses on energy, he told me anybody can be a mediator. He says, I use my mediation skills in my everyday life. I use them in my personal life, in my professional life, as a manager and as a leader. And I make sure to solve conflicts in my team. And he says, however, you do not need to have a legal background. You do not need to have this particular training to be a good mediator. All you need to know is kind of the mediation process and the mediation kind of goal. And then you will be. In fact, he says some of the best mediators are people who haven't had much more experience in the field, because they come with so much more kind of things to maybe look for, right? And Gandhi says something very similar. He says, a man's strength is not in his physical capacity. So Gandhi believed that a man's strength is defined by his willpower. So I think credentials or training should not be something that should hold you back. Number 3, I asked myself, how can I get started in getting experience in mediation, right? It's very difficult to enter the mediation community if you don't have past experiences. And one of my expert mediator mentors, her name is Mary Margaret. She, for her whole life, studied in for majority of her life, studied in the UK, and is a lawyer and has worked with indigenous communities and is absolutely amazing. She told me, quote, there are lots of opportunities through volunteering. You can hone your skills by doing. By doing. It is like practicing mediation is similar to riding a bike. You take your courses, you learn the skills, you could volunteer at a family law tribunal or civil resolution tribunal space. There is a member from India, I can send you the name later, but he has partnered with the government and has provided a couple different centers on free mediation. And you could even volunteer through him. And so it's really kind of getting that experience, right? And furthermore, she goes on to state that you have to learn in little pieces, right? Gradual ways, which is also why gradually you establish a sense of confidence. And for experts in the field, so these are for people who are beginning, but for experts in the field who already have the experience, she said, I believe that community solving component is important. And for people who are experts in the field, they should try to engage in global opportunities, especially for senior practitioners. So going beyond the context in India, going to the context in Japan, how do people solve issues here? What are the common trends? What do you observe, right? And Zoom has made this wonderful because you can honestly engage in different Zoom mediations across the world. So this is a wonderful way for senior practitioners to become engaged in this some more. And I can provide some different resources for you if you're interested in learning a bit more. And It says, you may never know what the results come of your action, but if you do know nothing, there will be no result. I think that's one inspired Gandhi quote. And I think the results are ultimately extremely important to think about with the practice, right? Remember, like mediation is like riding a bike from that particular mentor. So the fourth question I had is, so what is the most important mediation? You have to know so many things, right? Body language, you need to know linguistics, you need to have a sense of a lot of different things going on. But what is the most important thing? And from all of my mentors in the field of mediation that I asked, there was one particular person. Her name is Carly. She is a lawyer and works in the US. Her theme is about relationship building. And I can forward you material of her if you'd like, but she's absolutely amazing. And she told me, the mediation, quote, the mediation has gained greater momentum. There are still people who do not know much about mediation, to be honest. What it entails, how it works, the criteria for choosing mediators. And it's very much needed. So mediation is a process and slow progress because you have to continue to what you're doing, and relationships matter. So her big theme is how mediation is all about building relationships, right? It's about kind of engaging with someone at a much deeper level. And you can practice this, like in this conference call, you can talk with someone in the street, you can have a conversation, right? And that's kind of the training that goes on. I'm almost done. But then I said, okay, so but that didn't answer my question. What is the most important thing in mediation? So besides relationships, what else should I look for? And one expert mediator who works in back in the west of the United States, he's a lawyer, he's a Rotarian, he has built a private practice, he's began his own mediation center in the US. He told me it's about listening. And I think you've heard listening a lot, right? But he told me, and I'm going to quote him, he said, in mediation, you have to try to listen. It's not just a matter of you presenting a logical argument. There is more to this. You have to explain it to the other side, why it is to their benefit. You have to put yourself in their shoes. You have to put yourself in the shoes of truth. And he says he loves Karl Popper, which this is the theme of his mediation center in the US. And Karl Popper basically said, the aim of argument should not be victory, but progress. End of quote. So he told me the goal of mediation, to be honest, is one of the reasons is basically progress. He says, I really like it because I'm not on either side. I listen to one side, I listen to the other as hard as I can, and I do my best to bring my mind to a sense of fairness. And I think that's wonderful to remember whenever we think of mediation at that sense. And so the last question was the one that inspired me a lot. And the last question is, so what should I remember about mediation? And there was an absolutely amazing, inspiring young mediator, and reminds me to the speaker before me. And she founded an organization in Africa called Messengers of Peace. And she mediates like about a lot of young people who were instrumental in the elections of the state. And she trains and she mentors, and she's appeared in the news, and I've gotten the opportunity to interview her. And I asked her, so I'm so curious. You have so much energy. You've started a foundation, you're helping train 1,000 people. You have a wonderful philosophy. I'm like, where do you get your energy from? Where is this energy coming from? Do you go to seminars, or do you go to conferences, or your friends? What is it? Please tell me the secret. And she told me, I will never get tired of mediation because I have faith. So she has a very interesting saying. She says, in faith, she leads. And she talks about how she doesn't, her energy does not stop, because her energy, she gets it from her higher power. In her case, it was God. She says, I get my inspiration from God, and I can always go because it never ends. So she says to me, my motivation for not stopping or for getting burnt out or for being tired about my energy. He says, no, my source comes from God, and that source will never stop. So that means I will never be tired of this field. And I found that extremely inspiring. Whether you have faith, whether you do not have faith, whatever you believe in, I think it's always important, at least what she taught me, is to have a source of energy for that. And so I leave you with those 5 teachings in relation to Gandhian kind of attitude and also questions that I myself had. And for you to think about and for you to seriously consider whenever you think about mediation in the field. I myself feel like mediation, after I heard so much, and I've also had the opportunity to interview Mr. Simon, but his presentation speaks for itself. I think at the end of the day, for me, if I could put all the advice together, mediation is something that my ancestors also played a big role. So I am from the United States, but I am also from Peru. And in Peru, the Inca civilization, no, not the Mayan civilization, the Inca civilization, they had three pillars of philosophy. And the Incas, 5,000 years ago, literally 5,000 years ago, they said, in any process or in any trust building or any mediation, in essence, they said 3 things. Number 1, which is, and I say it often, it's amasua makeja majuja waikepanakuna, which is do not steal, do not lie, and do not be lazy, which talks about awareness, transparency, and action. Do not lie about what you don't know, being humble, accepting that you don't know everything. Do not lie, do not steal from others the opportunity of getting to know you, right? Being open, being kind to people, and being open to you sharing your expertise and what you have to learn. And do not be lazy. So putting everything that you learn in action. Because after this conference can be useful or useless, right? And if you put what you're learning today in action, that'll be wonderful. So that is all I have to share. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Your energy is infectious. Thank you so much for your energetic. I think the participants are also charged up, and we can have a few questions from the participants.
Yeah, actually, there were some questions for Simon. The first question, in fact, that was my question. How important, I will read out all questions of Simon together. How important is non-verbal communication for rapport building and trust building for mediators? That's the first question. The second is from Anshul Sharma. Theories of dialogue establish dialogue as a key tool in mediation, but most of the times in a conflict, we forget to create that space of dialogue wherein mutual respect, deep listening to others, and acceptance matters. In conflicting situations, how may we create that space for dialogue? And then the third question for Simon is, a mediator is successful if she or he ensures a mutually respectable conversation, whether or not an agreement is reached. But this also practically qualifies to be a successful mediation in the absence of an agreement. Whether this practically qualify to be a successful mediation in the absence of an agreement. So these are the 3 questions that were for Simon. Also, may I request Pankaj to share the feedback link for those participants who wish to get a certificate to fill it and send it, so that the certificates for taking part in this program, they can get it. Also, I request others also to please write in the chat box any possible questions that they might ask to any of the participants, except Fatima, because she is not available in this. She had sent her voice message. Thank you very much.
Okay, there was one more question there, and it was Elizabeth, I think, asked this question. I'll go down the list. I especially enjoyed your comments on reflection. How do you reflect in writing or self-diaries? That's a very, very good question. I did a paper on this, and a lot of people verbalize self-reflecting. It's just as important to write. So to get the benefit out of self-reflecting, if you just verbalize it, you don't imprint it in your brain. So it's really important to what you speak to your mentor. So you'd get a mentor to self-reflect. You should write it down and have a diary. So I have a daily diary, and I just add that reflection, and I go back and look at that every now and then, and that really does help build my self-reflection. I hope that answers that question. How important is non-verbal communication for rapport building and trust building for mediators? That's another very good question. I don't think you need to be too focused on non-verbal communication or be aware of non-verbal communication unless there's something that's culturally sensitive. I think if there's something culturally sensitive, then you do have to be aware of that. I think the more important with rapport is understanding where the people or their culture or where they're at. So I like to what called is mirror the person I'm dealing with. So if that person is an introvert, I won't be overly aggressive in my communication. I'll be a little bit more reserved and talk to them. So it's about mirroring the person that you're with and being able to swap between that when you're talking to people. What you're doing is you're just making them feel comfortable. So the important thing is make people feel comfortable. And then once people feel comfortable, you build rapport. Theories of dialogue establish the dialogue as the key tool in mediation, but most of the times in conflict, we forget to create the space of dialogue wherein mutual respect, deep listening to others and acceptable matters. In conflict situation, how may we create space for dialogue? I'll take this from the point of view of people that are in conflict together. So you're the general public mediators. You're trying to create a mediation between someone that you're in conflict with. I think it's really important to accept that we might be wrong. So if I'm ever in a situation with my family, my children, and something happens and then I get angry or I'm trying to solve an issue, I'm the first person to put my hand up and say, you know what, I apologize. I'm probably wrong. And what that does is diffuses the conflict immediately. Whether I'm right or wrong, it doesn't matter. What matters is the communication between us moving forward. And I think you've got to let go of whether you're right. So in conflict situations, to make the space, you've got to allow the space for the other person to maybe be right. And by doing that, you're opening up the space to have a conversation. And if you're opening up the space and that person's not angry, then you can say, well, why did you think that? Why did you say that? Did you know how that made me feel? That made me feel a little bit angry. So you're giving the space for the dialogue to happen. I hope that answers that question. And the last question, a mediator is successful if he or she ensures a mutual, respectable conversation, whether or not agreement is reached. But will this also practically qualify to be a successful mediation in the absence of agreement? My core competency, my core goal is to always have a mutually respectable conversation and have the parties communicate. And that is my agreement. I mean, ultimately, I'm brought onto the table to write an agreement, but that's not how I think about it. I come up with an agreement because the parties have talked for a period of time and they come up with solutions themselves. I just give them the platform and reality test and ask them, you know, is that what you think? And ask them questions to make sure both parties are understanding the other party. So if that's all I've done, then I believe, that's my own personal, is that you've successfully mediated if there's no agreement, if the parties have communicated. And because that's all we want. If we went out in the world today and all of us, all of the 100 participants in this conference went out and just worked at helping other people have a conversation and understand each other, we would start building momentum in this planet. And that's all we're asking. We're asking people to work peacefully together and work through miscommunications or misunderstandings. So I hope that answers the questions. Thank you.
Any other question from anyone before we close down for the day? Yeah, another question for Simon, in fact, from Darshan. How can we develop the ability to read the process of mediation dispassionately when the cultural context involves the mediator himself or herself?
How can we do that? I don't fully understand the question. Is the person able to speak on the chat at all?
Yeah, no, he is writing, how can one develop the ability to read the process of mediation dispassionately when the cultural context? Yeah, possibly Mr. Jishan, can you make it clearer to Simon what exactly you want to ask? Jishan, if you are there. Hello, Jishan, if you are there, can you make the question clearer?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, Darshan is audible.
My point was, okay. Just to clarify, my point was, if the mediator, the one who is in charge of the process itself, if somehow one of the cultural layers involves or he is the one or she is the one invested in it somehow. For example, in various conflict resolution, you may be a party to one of the streams of thought or one of the cultural or multicultural context. How would you go about it dispassionately? Or is it, I mean, you must be involved in various throughout your experience in certain conflicts and mediation processes where you might have some sort of like experience beforehand or somehow be involved. How would you like remove yourself from that kind of situation or the...
Yeah, I understand your question. That's a very, very good question. And it's one that all mediators grapple with throughout their existence of being mediators. You're always neutral, but that is one of the most complex things to be all the time. Even when today, with all my experience, I did a mediation earlier today, and I was the context of the mediation triggered past experience, and so my biases started to override my thinking. That's all right. You're allowed to do that, but you've got to be aware. You've got to be aware of it. And sometimes, if it happens to me and I'm not, I then just stop the mediation and I say, "Excuse me for a minute. I just need 5 minutes. I need to have a bit of time out, rethink, and come back into the mediation." You don't have to always be right, but you have to be honest. You have to be truthful. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thanks, sir, for that.
Any question for any other speakers, our distinguished speakers, Professor Drissia, Elizabeth, anyone else? Or we now go for the final vote of thanks. Dr. Anshu Arora, please.
Before that, let me also take an opportunity to announce that we are going to hold a film festival that is also in collaboration with Gandhi Samiti, Darshan Samiti, and we have co-collaborated with the Indian Documentary Production Association, and that would be held in the first week of February. So we are inviting entries till the end of this month, and we are glad that we will be in constant collaboration with all of you panelists and Gandhi Smriti for our future endeavors. Thank you so much. And now may I call upon our joint acting head, Dr. Gauri Chakravarti, to give a formal vote of thanks. Dr. Gauri.
Thank you, Dr. Anshu, and a very warm evening to all the guests who have joined. And we are so happy that we are collaborating with Gandhi Smriti, Darshan Smriti. A great appreciation to Veda Bhyasji. It was very inspiring to hear you talk about, the Gandhian philosophy. As a person who was born in Gujarat and somebody who studied in the land of the Mahatma for the first 15 years of my life, I cannot express the feelings that are going through my mind at this moment, giving this vote of thanks. So when we were very young, in school one would sing Vaishnav Jan to tene hi kahiye, je peer parai jane re. And at that point, we were so young to understand the larger meaning of why, and I would always associate it with Gandhiji. And at another occasion, we had a conversation with Professor Arvind Singhal at the university, who's a Gandhian scholar, and he narrated this very small incident where he talked about, when a journalist interviewed Gandhiji, and he used to travel in third class of the train compartment, and this person asks Gandhiji on, why do you travel in third class? And Gandhiji responded saying, and again, here I'm quoting the entire communication strategy that we've been discussing, and he responded, because there is no fourth class. And I remember at that moment, we had told all the students of communication how there's a word in Hindi called satik or precise, how precise, the source of this conflict resolution and the person we are discussing, how important it is to understand, every moment of negotiation and resolution that was brought in his communication. With great gratitude and humility, I wish to thank Professor Simon Howden. Sir, your concepts on communication, on conflict, they were really, some very important points to notice. You also talked about the element of listening, and I think that's critical for all the young students of Amiti School of Communication, Amiti University, who have joined us today. Professor Drissia, the whole concept of otherness, positivity, love, hate, terrorism, so precisely worded in your presentation. We are very grateful, ma'am, for your presence and for joining us. What can one say for Fatima, a young crusader? And though she wasn't there in person, she was definitely there in spirit. And I'm sure a lot of us were listening to her, even though there was a technical gap, we were waiting to hear what she had to say. And Elizabeth, you are such a young person. But, in Buddhism, they say that wisdom is not connected to age. So this fallacy of the fact that a young person cannot delve into wisdom is something that even the Indic philosophy challenges, and Gandhiji himself, has commented on it. So our gratitude to the Gandhi Smriti, to Dipankar Shri Gyanji for giving us this support, and we really wish that our students will take home some message from this conference. We request you to keep associating with the university, and it's very important in the Indic philosophy and as Indians to recognize, the reason why we are here and the founding members of Amiti. So I take this opportunity on behalf of our founder president, Dr. Ashok Chauhan, our dynamic chancellor, Dr. Atul Chauhan, and the Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Balwinder Shukla. On their behalf and with great humility, I thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Anshu. It's been an excellent event.
Thank you all. Thank you all. And we really look forward to meeting all of you more than often and trying to bring together people all across the world in our pursuit for peaceful and harmonious coexistence. Thank you very much.